Hiya, and welcome to Unpack and See, Revisited. Today I'm giving the Design a Vinyl Stitch figure another go with the Castle Art acrylic paint set.
Didn't you already do this?
Why, yes, I did.
Then...
I know, but hear me out. When I painted the first one, I was also testing out a set of Castle Art paints. I don't think it's fair to one and done an art supply unless it's really bad. And how I was trying to use them probably affected the results I got. Therefore, I has a good excuse to try again. And it's Stitch, for crying out loud. But this time it's not going to be Stitch.
Wait, what?
This is going to be Experiment 624. That's right, badass evil siren turned intergalactic singing sensation herself.
The bird keeper. Angel!
To complete her, I'll be using the Castle paints again and see what I think this time. First though, I have to change and add a few things to the figure. I mark out where her antenna will be and drill 2 holes in her head. The little hair bits have to go. I just shave them off with the flat edge X-Acto. Be very careful when using a blade like this and have your hand well out of the way if anything goes flying. Also, wear eye protection in case of the blade breaking.
You'll shoot your eye out?
And then just take your time and wiggle the blade under the part you want to remove. Once the majority of the bumps are gone, I use the Dremel to smooth it down. For the antenna, I used some craft wire and bent them into shape alongside each other so they'd match. I used painter's tape to cover up the area of the wire that was going to go in the head. And mixed up some epoxy clay. You mix equal parts of A and B, and you get an air dry clay that turns rock hard after a few hours. Something funny I noticed about the clay, however, is part B gets this yellow discoloration on it no matter how tight you think you put the lid back on. Doesn't seem to mess with the mixture, and the color goes away once it's all mixed in, so I'm not a chemist. I do plan on reordering this product, so we'll see if that happens with the next batch. Once it's fully mixed, I rolled it into equal snakes that I intended to wrap around each wire. That turned into a big old hot mess. So I scrapped it and started over with the how-to engineering. When I say this stuff dries rock hard, I mean it. I trusted going with shorter bits of wire just stuck into the ends rather than having it run all the way through. I stuck my glass surface over the wire shape and formed them out. Push the wire into the ends. And set them aside to dry. Quick note, doing it this way, one side of the antenna is going to be a bit flat, but you can easily round them with wet sandpaper later, which I did. And I did prime the entire figure in gesso this time rather than adding it to the colors. And I'm not going to attach the antenna until the end to make the painting and shading on the rest of the body easier. Using the French Violet, Rose, Davies Gray, and Titanium White, I mixed up a desaturated pink for her body, which dried a bit too light the first coat, so I added a bit more rose for the second. And filled in the notches on her ears with epoxy clay, since I forgot to do that earlier. Now for the overall color scheme, Angel is a bit of a mismatch of Stitch, but not Stitch. And don't think the animators made it easy since she's not the same across the franchise. Like for instance, she didn't initially have the back markings that Stitch does, but by the time we get to the anime, she does. Thus allowing me room to choose as I will with my rendition. I don't want to get bogged down in the details of screen accurate to insert episode number and original air date here, and just have fun with it. I use the same colors for the sand and the pineapple that I used on Stitch, except the green of the leaves. The color I used last time, the permanent green, dried funny. Had this weird skin to it. It just, ugh. This time I switched to Hooker's Green.
I beg your pardon.
Well, there's just so many things I could say, so many euphemisms I could infer.
I ain't touching that thing.
This color was so much better than the last one. It dried perfect with no strange skin on it. The pastels took to it much easier. It's fascinating that two paints in the same set work so differently. And speaking of pastels, with a small paintbrush I add the dark shading to the lines of the pineapple. It's so satisfying seeing all these details start to pop. Once I'm finished, I will give it a couple of coats of clear sealant before going on to the next step. Then cut down a makeup sponge to what? Sponge paint! Just dip the sponge in the paint, dab off the excess on a paper towel, and tap it all over the surface. And I do the same thing on the sand. I used painter's tape to section off the striped area on her antenna, placing it across both of them at the same time so they'd be even. And used the chalk pastels to darken the area. I wanted more of a color shift than a distinctly painted line. And I used that same color and the sponge to darken the tips of her ears. And of course we can't forget to save our work, so it's outside for a sealant spritz to lock in that layer. I went with black for her eyes rather than purple, more to match Stitch really, make them look like a set. I used watercolor pencils to sketch out where her eyelashes would be and then filled them in with the acrylic. As well as finishing up the rest of the shading on the body. For the final bit, it's time to attach the antenna. I played around with how they were going to sit, and then once I was happy with it, I stuck one on with super glue just to hold it steady while I secured it better with the epoxy. I just mixed a pinch as I went. I'm not going for any details here, so I find it easier to smooth when you first mix it up rather than letting it rest for a while to where it's thick like grout. Not to mention I use my silicone tools and some water to get that nice smooth finish. I wrapped a rolled up paper towel around her to keep the antenna from sagging while it was drying. And attached the second antenna the same way. Once all that was dry, I painted and shaded the top of her head to match her body. And it's time for the photo shoot. I'm very pleased with the results this time. They make a really cute, chaotic couple. She turned out just as well as Stitch. Therefore, I have to say I give this paint a thumbs up. It's all about how you use it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching this process and that I've helped you a little bit in making a decision on paint, if that's what you're here for. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.